My next guests are Brenna Muldoon and Christine Connor. Brenna Muldoon is in her 23rd year in education. She is currently the K-12 Director for World Languages and ENL in the Burnt Hills-Ballston Lake District in Upstate New York and serves as the co-director of the NYCAL Exam Consortium and chair of the Capital Area Language Leaders. She started her career as a German teacher in the North Colonie School District. She is a recipient of the 2025 NYSAFLT Remunda Cadoux Award for Leadership in World Language Supervision. She has co-presented with her colleague, Christine Connor, on the Seal of Biliteracy at the Day of European Languages at the Goethe Institute in New York. She and Christine also presented at the 2024 and 2025 ACTFL National Conferences and the 2024 NYSAFLT Regional Conference in New York. Christine Connor spent her childhood and most of her young adult life in Germany. This is where she completed her college education and teacher training. She received her master's degree in German, English, and American literature and linguistics and education from the Saarland University. After her student teaching, her husband and herself relocated to upstate New York in 2008. For 18 years, she's been teaching German at the middle and high school level in New York State public school system. As a Goethe Institute GEM, she has had the opportunity for the past 5 years to support fellow German teachers with their professional growth and expertise. In her capacity as a GEM, she offers workshops online and at conferences. She's presented at the 2023, 2024, and 2025 ACTFL conferences, along with other GEMs and her colleague, Brenna Muldoon. Brenna and Christine have also co-presented at the Seal of Biliteracy at the Day of European Languages at the Goethe Institute and at the 2024 NYSAFLT Regional Conference in New York. Christine has two children, and her favorite pastime together as a family are the outdoors, where she enjoys hiking and skiing. Well, welcome to the podcast, Brenna and Christine.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having us.
Yes.
I'll start off with the question I ask everybody. Tell me about a time when you were in the trenches and managed to crawl out. I will start with Brenna.
So I gave this question a lot of thought, and I'm not gonna lie, I struggled because in some ways I think that we're actually always in the trenches, right? That's just we go in cycles. It's cyclical. Sometimes we're there longer than others, but I was thinking of doing this podcast with Christine. She may or may not know that I'm actually gonna share this, but um, when I was probably 7 or 8 years into my career, I was definitely in a rut. I was lacking inspiration, didn't love what I was teaching, was just going through the motions. Units were feeling stale, uninspired. And I myself, I just wasn't as invested. I didn't have the energy or the creativity that I had had in the earlier years of my career. Um, I don't know if I would necessarily consider it like burnout per se, which, we hear all the time now. But like I said, it was definitely in a rut. Um, and at that point in my career, I mean, only 7 to 8 years in, there's still a long stretch of time ahead of me or ahead of anyone at that stage in their career. And so I knew it couldn't really go on that way, that there needed to be some kind of change, but I was finding it difficult to find that inspiration and creativity within myself. Didn't really know how to change or get out of that rut. And it actually turned out that right around that time was when Christine started. She came to the North Colonie School District from another school district that she had worked in the area. Um, and having her join me and, our department as a whole was really reinvigorating to me at that time in my career. She came with fresh ideas, fresh energy, challenged me to definitely be a better teacher. Um, and I think everybody has, we all have times in our careers where we're sort of lacking that inspiration. We get stuck in a comfort zone and seeking out those colleagues and other professionals who can reignite that passion and creativity um, I think is how you get out of that rut, or at least one of the ways you could get out of that rut. I was very fortunate that that person sort of landed next at the desk next to me, right? And so, I was lucky enough to find that within my own school, but that could exist in anybody's school, and it doesn't even have to be within your same department, right? You could reach out.
Mhm.
Sometimes we get inspired by people who teach other subjects. But I think we can also find that in, our state, local, national conferences. We can connect with people via social media, blogs, even podcasts like this. I was listening to one of the previous episodes, and I think is her name Jessica Haxel?
Yes,
She's
Hackney.
from Maryland, or no, not
Hmm.
Maryland, from Connecticut, right? And
Yes,
I'm
Connecticut.
sorry, how do you pronounce her last name?
Patsy.
Yes. So I listened to her episode and I was so inspired. She was talking about like she had this acronym magic for like teaching inspiration or whatever, and I emailed her and she sent me her handout with it. So anyway, you just find that inspiration sometimes in unexpected places. So I think the key to getting out of the trenches isn't necessarily even about like finding the people that build you up or pump you up. I mean, that's important, but I think it's
Mhm.
also really the people that push you, the people that push you out of your comfort zone and push you to ultimately be better. Um, I also in my role as an administrator, I was trying to think about, kind of these two um careers, I guess, that I've sort of had as a teacher and as an administrator. And I think as an administrator, we're always in the trenches of advocacy, and especially as a world language and English as a new language department head. Sometimes that advocacy has to look a little bit different, but ultimately it's key for both. Always looking for ways to be relevant and visible. So some ways, I don't know if this is getting out of the trenches, but ways to sort of address those challenges, being present at Board of Ed meetings, giving presentations, events at the community level, school, social media posts, promotional materials, gathering data statistics, um, displaying student work, award ceremonies, inviting people to be part of things like both of our schools offer the Seal of Biliteracy, really celebrating those
Mhm.
students and their achievements. So sort of garnering that positivity. And again, it made me think of that other podcast episode that you had done where that was really a theme, right, of that positivity. So I was thinking about that too.
Mhm. Well, thanks so much for talking about some of those things that have helped you through the trenches and also pointing out like what you've learned from another episode uh, with a world language educator. How about you, Christine? When was a time you were in the trenches and managed to crawl out?
Well, I first want to respond to Brenna real quick, obviously. I did actually not know that you were going to mention that. I mean, it was no secret to me that we worked together as a dream team. It's interesting because my situation at the time when I came to the same school that Brenna taught at the time, the school that I'm still at now, I was laid off in 2011 due to budget cuts, and I had just been in my third year of teaching German at the middle school level at the time, and I definitely knew I had way more to give. I was a native speaker, I was well trained, and I came in with like a very mad attitude almost like, I mean, obviously happy to have a teaching job. It was point eight again, but certainly knew I had more to give and I wanted to teach more and not be laid off. And so I came in fired up, ready to go. But likewise, Brenna said I pushed her, but for the first time back in the day, I had someone who I could actually on a daily basis plan with. Before that, I was the only German teacher, and I think a lot of German teachers are in that boat. You're the only one in the subject area. And to have somebody who actually plans the same curriculum, it's one thing if you have other world language teachers, but if you really can sit down and plan the curriculum out and you have somebody else who looks and thinks through things with you, it's so invaluable. And we had a boss back then who would always mention that. And I remember that when she said, "Oh, this is so great, look at you sitting together," and we underestimated that. We were like, yeah, sure, let us go
Because
back
it seemed
to
natural,
work.
right?
It
It
seemed
seemed
natural.
natural and normal, yeah.
We were just in the office together and we were doing this. And so, yeah, in hindsight, I would say definitely true. But I think it's also a matter of sometimes you just click with one person especially well. And then if you can stay in touch with that person professionally, it's really a blessing. And that happened for us. And I'm glad it's still going on. So my trenches moment, I would like to say I'm out of it, but like Brenna had mentioned, I also think it keeps coming back sort of. And my eyes were opened when I first moved to the US because I'm a teacher trained in Germany, where you have to have two foreign languages for at least 6 and 9 years at the secondary school level to even study at a university. So, and you know, guys, I mean, for all the world language teachers here that have experience with European standards, learning a world language there is taken very serious. It's rigorous. It's a core subject, and the attitude of everybody is you have to learn more than one language. You know, that's just the way it is. And so I came here, and obviously I was raised in that attitude, and I was also trained in Europe. And so I really had a steep learning curve at first. Seeing that this German program was only around because students actually decided to enroll, and that it wasn't mandatory, and that just being a good teacher wasn't necessarily enough. You had to also make sure your program was cultivated with a German club. Back then, the middle school didn't have an exchange, but the high school certainly did, and the high school German teacher did that. And so I just had to adjust. And I feel like that is sometimes it's easier than others. Like Brenna said, it's cyclical. And just this past year, I found it tough again to be that one person, you know, that has to organize all the German club events. We established a National Honor Society for the first time, so it was a new thing on the plate. We do have the exchange every 2 years, and I wouldn't want to miss that experience, but it consumes a lot of time. Every listener here who's organizing exchanges, you go above and beyond, and you also sacrifice family time away every 2 years. Anyway, I don't want to sound negative, but so my trenches experience is you have to be way more than just a teacher in a fringe subject here. And you also have to compete, unfortunately, with other fringe subjects. For us at school, for example, it's also business. You know, there's just other subjects that also are electives, and they also want the students to enroll. And so for me, it was really, because I had lost Brenna as a colleague at the time. She was still my supervisor and obviously a colleague in that role, but we weren't sitting at the desk next to each other anymore like we used to. She wasn't my daily input anymore. And so the Goethe Institute came to me through COVID, and I'm really that is the one good thing that happened to me during COVID. I had originally signed up to be mentored by them to be better at online teaching, because I had no experience with that. So I signed up for some remote teaching advice, and that's how I ended up becoming first a coach with them through an intensive 10-week training experience. And then the coaches really got transferred into what we now call the GEMs, the General Education Multipliers. And those ladies and that community is just so valuable because they're still excited. They have a growth mindset. There is so much learning to be done when you're around them. And it just really reminded me, hey, you can do better. You can end up complaining about your situation, but at the same time, there's so many people out there doing it. They're doing it well. And, you know, it just, shows me that every time I get together with them, I'm reminded that, hey, yeah, it is tough, and teaching is very much a profession in the trenches, but you can do it, and you can do it better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's great to hear that when you came to the school, you connected with Brenna, and that helped move you forward and just get more inspired, and then also connecting with the Goethe Institute. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how I found out about the two of you. So I mentioned ACTFL for those listening who are not world language teachers. It's the national conference for world language teachers, and it's every November. I went to your session in 2024 and reached out. Your session in 2024 was called Beyond Comprehension, Engaging Students with Texts in Meaningful Ways, which was about engaging students in connecting learners to deepen language proficiency through strategies beyond comprehension questions. You've also presented together at ACTFL 2025, which the session was called Rock the Block Schedule, Strategies to Keep Students Engaged for 80 Minutes, which I think is something a lot of teachers need strategies with. We have a 110-minute block at my school. So talk to me a little bit about your experience just presenting at these national conferences together, and how you maybe tag team with putting the presentation together and bringing both of your expertise into that presentation.
Do you want to start?
Sure. I mean, well, again, I will say that I credit Christine sort of being the driving force. I think because of her work with the Goethe Institute GEMs, this kind of feeling of wanting to provide professional development, right, is ever present. So she's really the brains behind the operation, and I will say that it was really through her ideas of what we could offer. It kind of started there, and then we don't work in the same school district anymore, so we collaborate. Either by spending hours, logging lots of hours at our local Panera,
Yes.
sometimes virtually like this, or we work sort of synchronously. But I think because we had those years co-planning and working together, we know how we operate, so that makes that process of preparation pretty seamless, I would say. And then I think in both of our proposals, or both of our presentations, um, it's almost like getting back to the basics in a way, right? Of like thinking about what do teachers need as far as tips, strategies, supports that are going to help them with their everyday planning, strategies for lesson planning, easily accessible ideas, easily implementable ideas that are practical, but will also level up instruction by enhancing engagement. Um, and I think there's some overlap in philosophy and ideas in both of our proposals that I think came across. So, Christine, please feel free to add to that.
Yeah, so the Goethe Institute GEMs, they basically what we do, and if you go on the website, you can also see that we offer workshops to anybody who's really interested, right? You can book a GEM to come to your department to present to your AATG chapter meeting for immersive weekends, basically, or even administration. Why should we support a German program? So GEMs offer workshops, and they also offer workshops at the ACTFL, and that's really true. That's how I came honestly to be pushed to present at a national level, because that seemed daunting and a little scary at first.
Yeah.
And so I first had to present, or not had to present, I presented with Heidi Lechner, who's also a really a colleague you can learn so much from. And she's also a gem. And we also presented on one-on-one classroom routines because we felt, like Brenna said, that a lot of teachers come to these conferences and may also be new and may need help more for the daily teaching than any crazy AI technology that you may use once or twice. Not that I'm against technology, but you know what I'm saying. So I got into it that way, but me and Brenna are just we work together so well, and we knew that. And we also know that as co-presenters, it's very smooth. When I'm with Brenna, I also know that she will definitely listen, and whatever I'm forgetting to say, she will supplement. So I'm very happy that she also was willing to present with me. And yeah, so we have been doing this, and hopefully we'll do it in years to come. Because yeah, I think we're a good team together.
Yeah, and tell me a little bit about some of the strategies that you shared in the session about planning for the block schedule, because it does take strategies, obviously, to change up activities, get kids up and moving. When I was trained to be a world language teacher in the early 2000s, that was my philosophy: change up activities every 20, 30 minutes at least. But I see there are some teachers that are kind of dragging the same activity out over 50 plus minutes. So what would you say to teachers who are maybe lacking, I guess, knowledge of like what keeps students engaged in the world language?
Well, so at the start of our presentation, we referenced a study that was done by Microsoft in Canada that showed the, average human attention span and how the human attention span has actually decreased quite significantly. And they made a comparison of the human attention span to that of goldfish, and goldfish actually have a longer attention span. Um, so we kind of, basing looking at some of that research on just attention span in general, we kind of know, right, that it's natural that there are lulls, in anything. I mean, whether you're sitting in a lesson, whether you're listening to a presentation or whatever, there's sort of those peaks and valleys of when your attention span is at its highest and its lowest. And so being cognizant of that and sort of using it to our advantage, right, when we're planning. So thinking about those moments in the lesson when we know we have their attention at the beginning, right? We know we have their attention at the end, and then building in some of those movement activities when we know that the attention span is low. So some of it comes a little bit from the research, and some of it also comes from just looking at your class. Like when I started teaching block schedule, so I'm now in my third year teaching block. Previously, we had, 45-ish minute periods. I knew that I needed to switch things up when all the kids started asking to go to the bathroom. Or when their eyes glazed over. So I'll let Christine talk more about like some of the actual strategies that we presented, but it was sort of rooted in that idea.
I want to respond to your question, how do you structure it? Do you change it every 20 minutes? It's interesting because I hear those same strategies, or I hear calendar talk at the beginning. We adopted a very simple lesson plan that is a little different. It doesn't base on every 20 minutes or whatever, but it's very flexible. And so we always start with some warm-up that should be motivating or hook you in. It could be like pictures. It could be going back to what you previously learned. Then we introduce the vocab that's relevant of the day. And after that is when you first have to get out of your seat. So we focused on that phase mostly in our presentation, where we gave some strategies of what you can do. For example, a a reading activity that you have, text that you have, instead of have the students sit and read them and answer questions, you could just hang the text up around the room. You could create QR codes with the text, and they could even go and scan if they're allowed to have phones. We are not using phones anymore, and I'm happy about it, but just bringing in some AI or technology ideas as well, right? So you run around the room, you find certain information, you work together with a partner, you can bring in a competitive element. Oh, what group found all the answers first? You could reward that. And, all of those little changes. It's still a reading activity, but you make the students get out of their seats, you have movement, you have competition, and they appreciate it and they get into it. Another activity for grammar, for example, is also, instead of having the endless translate this or form these sentences using this tense, is you literally have the students stand up with slips of paper and you have them form what we call living sentences. So they become the sentence. It could also be a competition. The teacher says the sentence in English, whatever group forms it first, gets the point. And it's those things. And it works from 6th through 12th grade. They like getting out of their seats, and they often give us feedback saying this is the only class we ever get up in 80 minutes, which I find hard to believe because, like Brenna said, if you're tuned into your group, you will notice now it is time to get up and move around. What were some other, vocab, you can also I mentioned the vocab list, and we very much use it, but you can also have the students get up and do like a quiz trade activities with cards to quiz each other. I mean, I could just talk an hour just about the strategy, but what I also what occurred to me, and this is maybe special to what we do together, is so we both were forced to into block scheduling, and then we both want to do it well. So, we sit down and we reflect, and we're just not like, oh, okay, whatever. So we'll just add 2 lessons to make it longer. We read research, we talk about it, we want to make it work, and then it turns into a presentation.
Yeah. And I think that's something that German teachers and other world language teachers can benefit from, hearing about how to make that work in the classroom. And something I see lacking are just district or school level PD for world language teachers. So it is really important to attend the national, state, or regional conference for world language teachers to get these ideas. I also wanted to talk to both of you about a couple of different things. So there's some things that you're both involved with in terms of the Seal of Biliteracy. Talk to me about that. And then you also, I think that's tied to the Tag der Europäischen Sprachen, the Day of European Languages. So talk to me about how you got involved with that.
So, we started the Seal of Biliteracy when Christine and I worked in the same district. Our department started offering the Seal of Biliteracy. I think 2017 was the first cohort of kids who were eligible. And it was ultimately sort of like a department decision. It was something that was relatively new in New York at that time. I think it had only been offered maybe for 2 or 3 years prior to that. There weren't very many, especially local schools that were offering it. So we tapped into some of the resources and reaching out to some of those other schools to figure out what they were doing. But ultimately, I think we really crafted a lot of our own sort of in-house projects and our approach to how we were going to do it. So ultimately, students who are at the checkpoints, well, in New York lingo, checkpoint C level, um, they're expected in New York State to demonstrate the intermediate high proficiency level to earn the Seal of Biliteracy. And most of the kids getting the Seal of Biliteracy via their world language and English are in their kind of 12th grade, in Christine's school, it's the level 5 or AP classes, those students who are eligible to get the Seal of Biliteracy. So they do a project, like an academic-based project, where they choose a topic of their interest. They do research in the target language, and then they present their project in front of a panel where there's then like a live Q&A session so that it incorporates all three modes of communication. The school district where I am right now, it functions in a very similar way. One of the things that when Christine and I worked in the same school district, and she continues to do that in her program, is the Seal of Biliteracy project is sort of the culminating project. So all the students theoretically would be eligible for the seal as long as they meet all the criteria. In New York State, we have a matrix of how points are accrued in the English and the world language. So at the Day of European Languages at the Goethe Institute, what we were presenting on, it was sort of two things. So I sat on a panel where we sort of talked about general things about the seal, pros and cons. And then Christine and I had a separate session where we talked specifically about our school district and how we got the Seal of Biliteracy off the ground, and how we sort of operationalized it. So. Yeah, it's a great opportunity for kids. And in New York State, the state education department is currently in the process of revising our graduation requirements. And they have this new thing that they're calling Portrait of a Graduate. And one of the things that is highly valued in that is one of the things is the Seal of Biliteracy. There are other seals and other content areas that kids can get, but I think the Seal of Biliteracy was really at the forefront, one of the very first seals for students to obtain, and it is sort of I think it set up a model, I think, for a lot of other content areas to follow, to recognize students' interests and achievements and proficiency levels.
Yeah, and maybe I can, yeah. Oh, go ahead, sorry.
In terms of students in the program who've received the seal, has that number stayed stagnant or has it gone up in recent years?
So I would have to say it developed very rapidly the first couple of years, correct, Brenna? Like, at first it was only a couple of students and then it spiked, and now it is at a stable level, I would say. It's a thing to do at our school. The 12th grade students that are still enrolled in a world language class, they usually want to do this. It's kind of the carrot that is dangled at the end of their career. Just for program enrollment reasons, it's wonderful to have, as well as, of course, for their personal benefits. So maybe, do you want to talk a little bit about how we do it in class, or...
Yes, you could talk a little bit about how you prepare students, because I'm familiar with, how they prepare for AP or IB testing, but it is a little different with the Seal of Biliteracy.
Yeah, exactly. Because we don't do a test. I know some states, they offer a test, but what they do is they just, they take their Checkpoint C world language class. They have to have an 85 or higher. That's just what we established in order to qualify for the SEAL project. And then they do their own research on a topic that they like. One that comes to my mind right now is, for example, German bread, because there's such a big bread culture. It's also a UNESCO World Heritage. What do you say? Like, it was declared one of those because it's so unique. So the student would start researching about this, would have to read and understand all the texts they find. They would have to cite their sources. And then based on their research, they come up with a presentation. So that's where the presentational speaking comes in. They present on the topic. And then after the presentation, they have to answer questions from a panel. And the panel is German teachers or, speakers. It cannot be a family member or anybody. And then there's follow-up questions asked by the panel on the presentation. That is usually the part the students are most afraid of. This is where the interpersonal speaking comes in. And then they also write about their research. So it has all these 4 parts, and they usually get very excited because it's something they can look into. It's a topic they can pick that they've always been interested in. And we had so many varied topics in the past. Obviously, soccer is a big one for some of them, but also culture, like somebody researched about the traditional clothing, Trachten, and how they are different in different areas. Some of them research about the Berlin Wall, you name it, we've seen it. And it's really a good, I like how we do this project, and I really hope we will not ever switch to a test or whatever in the course of what Brenna mentioned, that we're just, changing some of the graduation requirements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll just thinking, of a couple of things. So when Christine was talking about like the kids selecting a topic, you know, depending on what language they take, usually we encourage them to pick something that's culturally relevant to the language that they're studying, but something that they're really interested in. One, because they're going to invest a lot of time, right, into learning about that thing. But also because we know if they're interested in it, they're just going to do a better job. They're going to be excited to talk about it. They're going to have more to say. But I think we learned a lot over the years of what kind of coaching or mentoring is actually required for kids to be able to do such a high level project, at the end of their years of study in world language. So I think over the years, we learned how to better support kids through that process. And the other thing that I think came of it that was a really positive outcome was we started looking at our levels that are building up to, the lower level classes and what needs to be infused in the curriculum in those levels so that the very first time the kids are doing a presentation like this isn't their senior year, that we've built in kind of mini simulations, so that when they get to that 12th grade level, they're prepared. I think another thing that's worth mentioning, in a time when technology is so prevalent and the technology of translation apps and earbuds that can translate for you live, and which on the one hand are, again, when I put my ENL hat on, those are awesome, amazing, wonderful things that can be so beneficial to kids. But at the same time, when kids are trying to learn another language, having access to those things can be sometimes a hindrance, right, to them really learning the language and making it their own. I think because the Seal of Biliteracy has this sort of live, on-demand performance piece, you can't fake that. The kids really do need to be prepared. They really need to develop their language skills so that they can give a presentation at an academic level in another language, and also that unscripted conversation that happens afterward, in that Q&A. A translation app is not going to help you with that. Kids really need to develop those skills themselves. So I think that, having that performance aspect is a very good thing for language learners.
Yeah, and it really prepares kids for using the language in the target country.
It brings me also back to, you mentioned the presentation we gave at ACTFL last year about reading. That was part of how do we get the students ready. We incorporate authentic texts all along in the levels already, and really try to scaffold so they can understand these texts, because then at the Seal of Biliteracy level, they pick their own texts and they're not supposed to translate them. And in fact, I always tell them, the more authentic text you have, the more input you have, the more vocab to work with you have. And yeah, so you can't just throw a project like this upon them without ever having worked up to that. Established reading strategies, a good vocab base. Yeah.
I wanted to also ask you all about the exchange program. So you've had students come from Germany in the fall, and then you've had exchanges where your students go to Germany in February. So talk about how long the exchange program's gone on and how that works in terms of maybe finding families and fundraising and all that.
Maybe I should start with that, Brenna.
Sure.
So currently the exchange program we have is with a school in Saarbrücken, Germany. It's the Ludwigsgymnasium. And that program is now celebrating its 20th year in 2026, which is super exciting. We have been lucky enough that that school is committed, just like we are. I think you really have to have colleagues across the pond that are committed to making this work, committed in fostering the relationship and, working with the cultural differences. We go every 2 years just because every year would be seriously too crazy, and B, because we don't have enough students on the US side that take German to send a group of like 23 every year. I say 23 because that's usually what it comes out to. It's always between 21, 25 students. And what happens is that we, the US side, usually initiate the whole process because we present about the program, and then we have to see how many families here are willing to host and willing to participate. And then we communicate that number over to our partner school because they traditionally have more interest, obviously, because more kids are taking English there. And so once we know who wants to participate, I want to stress, by the way, it's not a merit event. So you can participate. You don't have to be an A++ student in German. What really matters is your interest in the language, the culture, and if you can also handle such an experience of being away in a foreign culture, staying with a foreign family. That's what we're looking at first. But at the same time, the students have to be in good academic standing overall, of course, because we don't want anybody to drown because they will miss 7 days of school. It's always attached to a break. For us, it's the February break that we're traveling, but they will miss school and they are responsible to make it up. And we certainly don't want to cause a situation for everybody where they'll just drown academically. However, so it's not a merit. It's, you want to do this, you're excited, and then you register with us and we would look at your academic standing, if there's referrals, and once there's nothing in the way, then you're in. And so then the German side picks kids based on what the numbers we send them, and sometimes also the genders we have, like sometimes we have more boys or more girls, and so depending on, that's also the tricky part, depending on, can kids host somebody from the other gender? That's not always the case. So that is one of, I would say, the difficulties every year. And so then they send us their candidates, and then we usually start matching based on interest, based on hobbies, based on allergies, or can you live with a dog or a cat? Every year is a little different. This year was all about the big dogs in the house that some Germans didn't want. Yeah, seriously, you never know. And then, and then they come here in October and they stay for 2 weeks, which gives our kids a chance to establish a relationship with them in their usual environment, in their house. They can sort of roll out the red carpet for them. They go on all kinds of excursions. We take them to New York City, Boston, Homecoming was this year, so they got to experience a homecoming dance and the game, of course. And then when we go in February, the kids stay with that same family. They already know the partner, and over there we also do tours to several cities in the vicinity, and then we end up with 4 days in Berlin, which is obviously a highlight. And I would say this program is so amazing because it really allows the students to foster these lifelong friendships, and also, having a family somewhere else because the parents also play a big role. The only struggle I always see a bit, and if anybody's out there and has a better solution, is when they come here, the Germans, first there's a lot of English speaking. And to switch that when we're going and to force our students to speak a little bit more German there is always very tricky. Because a lot of times the parents also speak very good English. But yeah, if anybody's out there having a good tip how they can make that work, please send it my way.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to
And
add, Brenna, about the
yeah,
program?
I mean, I would say one thing I'll mention again, just in case people are listening to this, the school district that I'm currently in also has a German exchange. It's been a long-standing exchange program. They organize, or they're affiliated with GAP, which is the German American Partnership Program. And GAP also provides some support. So there's support in arranging some of the travel, at least the flights, um, insurance, and then also there is some financial assistance. So you had mentioned fundraising. GAP does have some scholarships for students who might need those, to be able to afford these trips. There's no sugarcoating it. It is very expensive. These trips are very costly, and that cost has skyrocketed. When I first started planning these exchange opportunities for kids, my first exchange was back in 2005, and it was under $1,000. And now it's close to 4,000. I mean, it's really crazy. Christine also uses a travel company. They have some opportunities within the travel company for kids to also have like almost like a GoFundMe kind of page that they can post and raise money that way. But that is certainly a challenge. I mean, when there are not funds from the school district, I know that some schools have organized like fundraisers, car washes, and that kind of thing. I think sometimes those things happen organically.
Yeah.
We have not done that. We do have some fundraising opportunities in our school, but it doesn't raise the amount of money, that's really going to make a dent in the cost of a trip for kids. We do have some scholarships that we can offer to students, but again, that's on a case by case basis. So I do wish there was funding, that could enable this opportunity to more kids that might not otherwise have the opportunity to go. But what I will say is, I think what's so special, a lot of school districts have trips, where they go and they stay in hotels and they visit all the, famous sites and have a wonderful time. And those experiences, there's incredible value in those experiences. The exchange is a really unique thing because you're making that personal connection, getting to know a family, getting to know a student. But I would say also, not every kid in your German program or whatever language you teach is going to be able to go, maybe for financial reasons, maybe for they play sports and the schedule or the family has. However, when the foreign students, whether they're German or, from another country, are in your school, when you're hosting, all the kids in your program benefit from that. So
Yeah.
even if they can't go on the exchange, they all have that experience of having those kids in their classes. They get to interview each other, they get to talk. So they all have that firsthand experience. And even kids who are not in your program, I mean, with Christine, it tends to be that because the Germans have a fall break usually in October. That's usually when they come to us, like September, October time, which also happens to be a big football season and homecoming. So, the kids are out in the community, like the exchange students, the kids and the kids, the American kids know, right? There's like a buzz in the community, like, did you see they were at the soccer game or they were at the football game or they were on the bus? Um, and that cross-cultural learning and experience is just invaluable for everybody, right? I mean, even the kids who don't take German, the kids who are taking some other language are still benefiting um, from that exposure. So,
Oh yeah, and they will come to your German club at Oktoberfest just to see the German students. I just wanted to add real quick too. So I also make a real effort because yes, cost is really a killer for a lot of
Yeah.
families. I make an effort to offer other opportunities. So we take the National German exam through AATG every year, and
Mhm.
kids that win gold in that exam can qualify for an all expense paid for trip to Germany for 3 weeks, which I had many years. I had a student win that trip and go overseas that otherwise could not afford that, or where that just would help. And I also personally just established a pen pal program with, of course, I have connections. It's the old school where I did my student teaching, but I'm sure there's other German schools that would be willing to do that, just so
Mhm.
that everyone has that exchange partner. And I know pen pals usually they don't develop a close relationship, but they can. And in fact, we
Mhm.
already had like kids come and visit their pen pals here, or our kids would see them when they go overseas. So yeah, if you can, just try to offer these options to as many kids as you can.
Yeah. Yeah, those are great ideas. And, going back to that pen pal piece, like people don't necessarily think about that nowadays, that everybody's just communicating through social media, but going back to just having either real letters or at least pen pals through emails and communicating with students, and they could do video calls with the student as well. That's such a great way to get a friend in the target country. We've had a great conversation around your work, your presentations together, some of the things that you've done in your German programs, such as the exchange. And I wanted to ask each of you, out of everything we've talked about, what's one thing you'd like listeners to remember? We'll start with Brenna.
well, when I thought about this and my response to this, I don't know that it's something that we've talked about directly. But I think that, in this moment when linguistic and cultural diversity are under threat, I think we've highlighted in our conversation the value of it,
Yeah.
the value of recognizing, the power of getting to know another culture, getting to know another perspective, expanding your own experiences. And all of our students really deserve the opportunity to connect with each other, to connect with other cultures and communities, but also see themselves reflected in our educational experiences. So I also feel like despite the fact that things might feel bleak at the moment, what we do is important, and I think that there is hope because the kids in front of us every day are interested, and we have a lot of power, to make a positive experience for them in our classes and bring other worlds and experiences to them that they might not otherwise get. Um, so yeah, I think that's ultimately what I would want to leave people with.
Great. How about you, Christine?
I would like to connect back to my in the trenches story when I said, I often felt overwhelmed or still feel overwhelmed by all the roles I have to fill as a German teacher. But
Mm.
just at this past ACTFL conference, in one of the presentations, a teacher of the year candidate said that it's okay to have like a dark phase, and it's okay, but what you should not do is compare yourself to others and try to be somebody else, because you just mentioned, all the tools, the social media out there. Yes, you see these teachers that promote themselves and it looks like they have everything under control and they have the best ideas on a daily basis. But that's perception, and you should really give yourself some grace, compare yourself to your own former self, and then see, hey, I had these great lessons in the past. I did these great things, and go back to them. Give yourself some grace, like I said. And what was also shared, what I take away from these conferences most are these little quotes that really stick with me. And one of the quotes was that the energy you put in can change somebody else's life. And that is very true for a teacher on a daily basis. You don't know who you reach most in front of you sometimes. You think you may, because it's the students that come talk to you after class or they come to your club, but you don't know that. And you may just leave a very positive impact on somebody for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, that's so important to remember. Like with teachers, we often don't hear about that until many years later. So yeah, and that's also a shout out to my former German teacher, Doug Phillips. So he taught when I was in Tulsa. I was going to high school in Tulsa, and he's been a Colorado educator now since at least the early 2000s. So he's still teaching German after 39
we
years.
saw him at the conference. Yeah,
he was the ATV president, right?
Yeah,
so and then I connect with him all the time when we have our Colorado conferences. So not everybody is eventually a colleague of their former German teacher, but I think that's the kind of impact you sometimes see from students that you've taught. So I wanted to ask each of you where people can find you online. We'll start with you, Christine.
So you can find me when you look at the Goethe Institute page for the GEMs, the General Education Multipliers. If you type that in, it'll pop up. I also have an Instagram, but that is mostly actually for my German program. But if you would like to check out what we're doing in the course of the year, it's Connor Frau at Instagram. So it's just like CONNORFRAU. And you'll see me and my German page.
And Brenna, how about you?
So I don't have a huge social media presence, but I do have an Instagram account, which is just at Brenna Muldoon, all one word, lowercase. And I use social media. I'm more of a viewer than I am a poster of things. So people are welcome to reach out and follow me, but I don't know how much you're gonna see, on my social media. But I'm happy to connect with people. People can also reach out to me via email, which is just bmuldoon@bhbl.org.
Okay, sounds great. Well, it was a pleasure having both of you on the Out of the Trenches podcast today, talking about German programs and some of the strategies any world language teacher can use to keep their students engaged. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.